Welcome to Fish and Blood Gaming. If you're looking to learn how to understand the fundamentals of playing Baldurs Gate, well, I got some tips here for you. All right, you can go to your local library, pick up a player's handbook for free, most likely. Otherwise, they got these all over the place. Baldurs Gate is based off of this tabletop game, and it's so close that a lot of the fundamentals you can look at this and kind of figure it out along the way. So step one, you pick your race. Basically all the races work in Baldurs Gate. None of them are going to put you so much ahead or so far behind any other one. Any particular one you go with, you get +2 to your most useful ability score, +1 to another, and then a few minor bonuses here and there. You know, some races have a couple like little tricks that they can get, and those will make a difference. But ultimately, we're coming over here to the ability score modifiers. This is very important. The whole game of Baldurs Gate is based off of this. Okay, so you start off with an 8, you have a -1. If you have 10, you have a +0. 12 to 13, you have a +1. 14 to 15, you have a +2. And then 16 to 17, 17 is your highest stat that you can start with. You get a +3. Okay, and then we have 18 and 19 is +4, and 20, which I do believe is the maximum of Baldurs Gate, that is +5. You can get a little bit higher than that, but you have to work for it. The natural maximum is 20. But you know, playing the game, you'll probably figure something out. But we're not going for any spoilers here. I haven't even beaten the whole game. But the fundamentals, you know, comes from this book. It's based off of it, right? So when you're looking at these ability score modifiers, you notice all the even numbers. That's the one that you want to get to. You know, 13 doesn't necessarily help you in Baldurs Gate over 12. If you got 12, it's the same. And it kind of goes along the way just like that. Okay, that's a fundamental thing. Okay, another thing, your proficiency bonus. This is a very big part of the game. Level 1 to 4 characters have a +2 bonus. So anything that you are proficient with, you get +2 to it until level 5, at which point you get +3. Excuse me. All right, and we can come over here and we see as we go up in level, our proficiency bonus goes up. It's going to max out at level 12, and it stays at +4. Okay, but we get to that +4, that's at level 9, and at level 5, we get to +3. Okay, so as your character progresses up to your max level, it's going to stay at the +4. But this is the point where you start all your skills and saving throws goes up, and this is the point where all your skills and saving throws up at level 5 and 9. So those are kind of like big deal numbers, levels. Armor class is how you stay alive in Baldurs Gate. Okay, your armor class is how hard it is for the enemies to hit you. Okay, and without an armor or shield, your character's armor class is 10 plus their dexterity. And if you're wearing armor carrying a shield, you add that to the 10, depending on what it is. Melee weapons use strength. Ranged weapons use dexterity. Melee finesse weapons can use strength. And you can even throw a dagger with dexterity if your dexterity is better. So generally, dexterity is one of the strongest attributes in 5th edition D&D because it can be both useful to ranged weapons and finessable weapons. That can be pretty good. Okay. So then you pick your race, and race is mostly flavor. You know, you can kind of get away with anything, but big ticket things. Barbarian. If you are a barbarian, you are almost half DPS, you're like half damage and half tank. All right, the barbarian's job is to get into the thick of it and soak up damage, use this rage, and reduce the damage so that the barbarian stays alive and can defend the team, you know, and defeat the monsters. All right, and they get special abilities that more or less do that. The bard, there's a couple ways you can play bards, but the gist of it is the bard can debuff or buff your allies, debuff your enemies, of course. They can do a little bit, a smattering of everything, right? They can get up into the thick of it if they pick the right feats and do a little bit fighting with their swords or crossbows. If they pick more of the spell route, they can really help supplement your party quite a bit. So the bards can be kind of your best fourth member, if you are looking at it like that. The cleric's job is to keep people up, and it's really, if your cleric is using all of their spell slots on healing the team, that's the least effective use of their spell slots. The cleric's job is to reduce the enemy's effectiveness at defeating your team. So, if you are using spells that can slow down your opponents, blind your opponents, keep them away from your team, make your team stronger, that will go a long way at reducing the amount of damage your team takes and kind of healing them by not letting them fail a saving throws. Bless is a strong spell. So if you just have that your first turn, your cleric casts Bless, maybe throws a bonus action. That Bless spell against the right kind of opponents, if your teammates pass their saving throws, will make it so that they take less damage. They're less likely to fall over. They're less likely to get held person. All these different CC crowd control effects. Bless will reduce the likelihood that they get crowd controlled. Okay, and clerics also have a little bit of crowd control effects on their own. So healing is always the last resort for the cleric, but it's all something that the cleric is good. You can fall back to, okay, my teammate got hurt, I'll heal him back, send him back into the fray. Healing the barbarian, super good, because the barbarian takes less damage than other people. So, you know, you keep that barbarian alive. Excuse me, it got a little bit of a cough, you know. All right, druid. The druid is basically kind of like a nature cleric. They got spells to crowd control the opponents. They can heal a little bit. They can get up in the thick of it. Depending on which kind of druid you pick, you get a little bit more melee, you get a little bit more healing, you get a little bit more of this and that. But the druid kind of fills a similar role as the cleric does. you crowd control the enemies, reduce, their effectiveness, increase your effectiveness. Your wild shape can be used to soak up a lot of damage. And also, keep soaking up damage, keeps your teammates alive. That can be really strong. All right. The fighter's job is action surge and extra attack. All right. A fighter is fantastic at burst damage. They can get up in there, get in the thick of it, and just burst your opponent down. You get a fighter a good weapon, and they're gonna turn into a churning machine. Fighters have heavier armor than the barbarian does. So the way that the fighter stays alive when they get into a thick of it is they try to get their armor class as high as possible. Because that's how the fighter stays alive. They put on the heaviest armor they got. You put the heaviest armor you can, the best armor you can, you put that on your fighter. You want to get their armor class up into the 18. You want to get it to 19, 20. That's your goal with the fighter. You get that armor class high, so that way when they're in the thick of it, the monsters are less likely to hit them than they are to hit the monsters. So it goes back to that armor class situation, and it's extremely vital to making your fighter work. If you just plan on ignoring equipping your fighter and just run around, your fighter will die. They'll get chopped down to ribbons. They do need armor to survive. Whereas the barbarian, it doesn't matter what, they don't even need anything equipped. You just send them out and they're gonna beat things up with their constitution modifier and their strength score. The fighter does not do that. The fighter has to kind of think about their positioning. They have to be in the right spot at the right time. You want to use your action surge when you have crowd controlled an important opponent. Maybe you, as the fighter, knocked your opponent prone. That is the time you crack your action surge. When the opponent is prone or they're crowd controlled, when you have the opportunity, you crack your action surge, and you try to last until you create an opportunity to crack your action surge, and that's when you really beat them up. A prone opponent that gets action surged is dead, or they're probably not getting back up, or if they do, they're at 7 hit points or whatever it is, But that you crack your action surge when you have advantage. Okay, so we go the monk. The monk is a support fighter. So usually you don't want just the monk up in front because they're going to get cut to ribbons. Monks have less hit points than the fighter. They have less armor class than the fighter. But monks have the capacity to do a little bit more damage, have significantly more maneuverability on the battlefield. So the monk is best paired with another fighter or another barbarian. You use 2 in tandem, and then they can beat people up together. Because the monk can get in there, beat them up. Maybe the monk can trip them, and set the fighter up for that big burst turn. And they have different variations on monk. You got, your open palm hands and, the elemental monk where you're punching spells and things. And then we come to the paladin. The paladin is a holy knight. Basically, the paladin is a fighter mixed with a cleric. You get a little bit more healing spells. and you're pretty much a good fighter. But the cool thing about the paladin is you get this ability called Divine Smite. And this, if you use it correctly, can just blow things up and smite them to death. So ultimately, the trick to being a paladin is you have to follow your oaths, okay? So the sacred oaths is when you take a vow to commit the paladin to the cause of righteousness and active path of fighting wickedness. All right. So once you take your oath, really, paladins have to be as good as possible or they become fallen. All right. You don't want to become a fallen paladin. You lose your abilities. You basically become a bad fighter. So basically, if you want to be a paladin, you kind of got to get locked into being as good and as much of a hero as possible. The rewards you get for being a hero and, a goody two-shoes and everything are really strong. Divine Smite, you get divine health and all kinds of stuff. You get spells. You basically become like a fighter with cleric spells. And paladins really can kick some butt. Especially with this Divine Smite. If you have a prone opponent, you have advantage. Paladin's gonna rip them apart. Rangers are kind of... This is your bow class. Maybe you go dual wielding. But Rangers are cool. They get skills and different abilities. So they're a fighter that leans a little bit more towards the druid rather than towards the cleric. So in the way that the paladin is kind of like a fighter cleric, the ranger is kind of like a fighter druid. Basically, that's kind of how it goes. Rangers get good at archery and two-weapon fighting easily. It's kind of self-explanatory. If you go ranger, you pick up the bow, you shoot the enemies, you get some cool special abilities. But Hunter's Mark is a spell that is kind of like a must-get for a ranger. Only the ranger gets access to that spell, so it's kind of like a class feature. But nobody says that it's a class feature, right? Because it's just one of your spells, right? But Hunter's Mark is one of those spells that's just so strong for the ranger that it kind of is a class feature. So when you cast that spell and you're maintaining concentration on it, you get an extra dice 6 on every damage dice that you roll. So when you're attacking with your bow, you get your normal bow damage plus the Hunter's Mark damage, right? Because as a ranger, you're a hunter. You're going around, you're looking for your targets, you're trying to take down your enemies. All right, so Hunter's Mark ultimately becomes a class feature for the ranger. It's a really strong spell. You really want to get that one. Okay, and the rest of it's kind of self-explanatory. You go with Beastmaster, you get like a cool pet. You go with the other archetypes, you do a little bit more damage. But maybe the pet is better for you. However you want to go about it. The rogue is your trap finder. The rogue is your lock picker. The rogue is your pickpocketer. Or maybe you go a little bit different way. Maybe the rogue is your talker, right? The rogue is good at the skill checks. Anytime you see Baldurs Gate, you're rolling the D20s. The rogue is going to be good at rolling those D20 checks. Most of these abilities apply to those dice rolls. that they get. A bunch of these abilities, that's what their goal is, okay? Is the rogue is going to help you succeed with a bunch of those dice rolls. They're going to help get you past the traps. They're going to help you get past the locks. You can use these guys to sneak attack your opponents. You put them in a spot, you hide them, and now they get to do bonus damage. Okay, so the way sneak attack works in Baldurs Gate is you have two ways. If you have advantage and you attack a target, you can apply sneak attack. Or if one of your allies is right next to a target, you then also have sneak attack. Okay, and it's very important that the rogue is using their sneak attack every turn. The sneak attack is fundamental to the damage that the rogue can output. So it's very important that you take one of your allies and put them right next to the target you want to sneak attack. That's how you make the rogue work. Otherwise, the rogue is going to take their shot. They're going to do like 4 damage, and that's going to be it. Okay? If you actually get the sneak attack and we have a rogue attacking, now they're going to do 16 damage if you get the sneak attack. Let's say they're level 3, right? So, or 5, right, for 4 dice 6. So every few levels, the rogue increases their sneak attack. You know, they start at 1d6, then they go to 2d6, and then 3d6 at level 5. So you want to try to get your rogue to odd levels to increase that sneak attack damage. It makes a difference. Okay. Then we have the sorcerer. The sorcerer can be built a couple different ways. You know, you can have them be your blaster, or maybe your crowd control character. But they get a bunch of special abilities. At low levels, sorcerers kind of start off a little bit weak, and as you increase in levels, your spellcasting classes get stronger and stronger because they get access to more effective magic. You know, at the start of the game, they're throwing magic missiles around. You know, they're blocking a couple attacks with their shield spells. And depending on the way you build your sorcerer, they can do extra damage with fire magic or cold magic and what have you. But some key spells you might want to pick. Magic Missile. There's been a bunch of times where Magic Missile is just the spell to be. Anytime an opponent has a high armor class, they only have a couple hit points left, you can use your Magic Missile to knock off a few of those characters off of the board. You know, if something only has like two or 3 hit points, you can throw one Magic Missile at it, and then like a couple Magic Missiles at somebody else. And you're now able to take multiple names off of the board. In Baldurs Gate, that's huge. So Magic Missile, Grease is a bread and butter spell. At level 2, you know, you get your invisibility, your flaming spheres, you know, scorching rays. Depending on the way you go with things, blur can be useful. And at level 5, big ticket things, you want to get your haste, get your fireballs. That's bread and butter sorcerer stuff right there. Okay. Warlock. Warlock is kind of like a sorcerer, except they're their whole thing is they get the best cantrip in the game, and that's Eldritch Blast. Okay, but Warlock is kind of like Sorcerer in a way, where, you know, they're casting, they're throwing their spells at their opponent and doing their things. But Warlock gets the best cantrip in the game. So whenever they don't have like a situation where they have exactly the right spell for the job, they can throw their Eldritch Blast and, you know, come in with some consistent damage. And Eldritch Blast works on almost all opponents, does some flat damage. You throw Hex in there, and now you're getting bonus damage on top. Hex works really good with Eldritch Blast because every time you shoot the particular missile, Hex triggers. Otherwise, you're kind of playing like a sorcerer. One of the big differences, the Warlock needs to take short rests. So you do a battle with the Warlock, take a short rest, you get your spell slots back, right? Take a battle, the Warlock uses all their spells, take a short rest, you get your spell slots back, and then they're good to go. You know, you use your spell slots, take a short rest, or take your long rest after your 2 short rests in Baldur's Gate 3. And that's their whole thing, okay? So the Warlock is kind of depending on getting a break in between combats. They will run out of their spell slots very fast. As they get higher levels, they get a few more spell slots, but they're always going to be pretty limited to how many spells they can throw out in any particular battle. It's just the spells that they do use, you really want to be as effective as possible with them. So I would really try to stick with some long-lasting concentration spells, and then some really bursty spells that you can throw out in any particular battle. It's why Hex is good, because Hex really synergizes well with Eldritch Blast. And then you can get like a cool pet, you can get some cool abilities and stuff. But Wizard, the fundamentals of Wizard is having the right spell at the right time. Okay? It takes time and energy and effort to prepare the Wizard correctly for the battles ahead. If that is not what you're looking for, Sorcerer is probably going to be up your alley. Okay, because the Wizard and their spell book requires micromanaging that the Sorcerer does not have to do. But the upside is when you go through the micromanaging of the Wizard, you will find that you often have spells that are a little bit better for any particular given situation that you might want. You know, maybe there's a Minotaur charging you, but you throw the grease down in front of them. All right, that's something a Minotaur does not like. All right, if they're charging down a narrow, tight alleyway and they have to come in contact with that grease, they're probably going to slip and fall and lose their turn. Whereas a Sorcerer really is going to need to get that magic missile. They're going to need to get the shield spell, get their mage armor, get those spells that they're going to cast all the time. Whereas the Wizard can get those spells as well, but can also get some of these extra spells that are going to come up for specific situations. So if you like having the perfect tool for the job and you want to cast spells, the Wizard is the right character for you. And that's about it. That's all the classes there. And we can talk about feats next time. If you like the video, leave a like, leave a sub. Thanks for watching. and I'll see you guys later.